Hello everybody and welcome to yet another anime review here today. We got a good one today, fellas. So I just finished the FNAF 2 movie. That's not why you're here, by the way. I just wanted to throw that in there. I finished it. It's a 7.5 out of 10. Anyways, on to the actual review. We're going to be talking about My Dress Up Darling today, fellas. I've been wanting to do a review on this one for about a week now, since, you know, I finished the show about a week ago. By the time you see this, it'll be a little longer than that, but still. And it was great. It was a good one. So, let me give you a quick rundown before we jump into things. Basically, with these reviews, I don't give a full summary of the plot. There are still spoilers. However, don't think that this is some sort of spoiler-free review. However, I don't go too in-depth, so I might accidentally not include spoilers, but I wouldn't risk it if you're scared to death of that. Yeah, so we mostly talk about my feelings on the show. I want to keep these reviews kind of shorter, because I don't want to keep making 50-minute long reviews. That video was way too long. It was a lot of me ranting. Anyways, on top of that, we go through each of the characters, or at least most of the important characters, and some of the story events. That's pretty much it. I give my thoughts. So, let's start with the characters. Okay, we don't really have a structure to these reviews necessarily. So, essentially, the main two characters of this show that everybody knows are Wakana Gojo and Marin Kitagawa. I'm not sure if Marin is the way you say it. Marine. I'm not really sure. So we're just gonna go with Marin. We'll do that. Anyways, quick rundown. Gojo is the main character, and he makes these things called Hina dolls. He grew up in his grandfather's workshop. I'm assuming based off of He sees some pictures of what I can only assume are his parents, so I'm assuming his parents are dead, which is why, that would explain why he lives with his grandfather. Basically, almost alone, And so, Gojo essentially has lived a kind of reclusive life. It's mostly just been him, and his grandfather's really been the only one he's been able to talk to or do anything with. And his entire life has been centered around these Hina dolls, which, a big theme in this show is gender-related hobbies and interests and comfort with doing things outside of the mold for yourself, right? So these Hina dolls, I guess people assume that it's like a female activity. This is Japan. It's a little bit different than here in the United States. If it were here in the U.S., you'd look at it and go, yeah, that seems like a male-centered activity. It's not like he's playing with Barbie dolls or something. Not to mention he's making them. He's not playing with them. He's just straight up making them. So, very different things. But anyways, he experienced this one event when he was a child where this little girl that I guess he was going to be friends with ended up yelling at him and getting upset for no reason because he liked Hina dolls, which she viewed as a female hobby. Once again, this is a little girl. They're they're probably 6, 7, 8 years old, okay, something like that. They are really young, and she got mad. What do you expect? I don't really... Anyways, that ended up being a huge event on his psyche, so he kept it, and now he's basically traumatized by it. Now, why that would traumatize him, I'm not really sure. You'd think your first assumption would be, hey, maybe this one person just doesn't like this, but I don't know. There's not a whole lot of background given on, how close they were or anything like that would explain why this was such a significant event. But from this point on, he essentially decided to never try to engage with another person again. And so he doesn't. Not until the beginning of the show, which is in high school, where he's not picked on, but he's pretty much just alone. And it isn't until later where he ends up bumping into Marin, who's supposed to be going to the, I guess is it the sewing room or chemistry? I don't remember what room it's even in. It's supposed to be empty, and she finds Gojo in there, and she's trying on her cosplay. So she doesn't want people to know that she cosplays, or at least people that aren't her friends, it seems. And Gojo doesn't want people to know that he makes Hina dolls. So when they run into each other, they go through their whole thing. Now, one thing I will commend this show with is that it goes through things very quickly. The pacing is just about perfect. It doesn't go too slow, and it doesn't go too fast. Well, okay, in Season 2, the pacing is arguably pretty slow, and a bit slower than I would like, but it seems that there's a lot of manga to adapt into the show, and so it makes sense that everything's not going at rapid fire speeds, right? I mean, this still isn't like To Love Ru, where they drag their feet the whole time. So it's not bad. It just gets a little slow later on, but it doesn't really bother me. So that's about it for the story. From that point on, Gojo pretty much helps Marine with her various cosplays, and they go through it from there. So they go through like Shizuku, Black Lobelia, and some stuff like that. Also, most of the stuff is more on the fan service side of things. Let's just say that. So there's quite a lot of that. Which, by the way, side note, I'm almost positive the writer of this, well, I don't know if the manga includes this, but I know that this show itself includes this. Whoever's running things, okay, I'm almost positive he's Tarantino. If you get my joke with that, then you understand what I'm talking about. I'll include a little thing. Anyways, there's a little bit of that in this show, and it kind of makes me uncomfortable. But besides that, things aren't too bad. Which, by the way, side tangent. This gets into another thing. Let's talk about fan service for a second here. This show includes a good amount of fan service. Now, it doesn't get bothersome, okay? It's not like To Love Ru where it's in every episode. But I think that's actually what makes it a little bit more impactful. So I would say this show is actually more mature and more late teens, adult-centered kind of media versus something like To Love Ru, because To Love Ru gets the 18+ label due to nudity. However, if you actually watch To Love Ru, I've said this before, it feels more like a kid's show, and the only thing that pulls you out of thinking it's a kid's show is the fan service. That's it. That's the only thing. Otherwise, dialogue, action, even the animation isn't very gritty. It's very cartoonish. Right? Now, compare that to this show, it feels a lot more like it's designed for adults or people who are a little bit older, just in general, to enjoy it. Otherwise, you don't get the full effect of things. Not to mention, most of the stuff that they are cosplaying in this show is from less appropriate media. Let's just say the dark side of Steam. We'll go with that. The kind of stuff that Monica would joke about on Doki Doki Literature Club if she saw what your tab was opened up as. That kind of stuff. And so there's quite a lot of that sort of thing in this show, and it definitely changes the perspective of things. Also, this is a minor detail, but there's some cursing in this show, right? So like To Love Ru, they almost never curse. In this show, they curse all the time. Now, not like invincible, but still, a good amount. So I would say this is more so designed for people who are at least 16, maybe 15 years old. I would say more of the target audience would be like 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 20-year-old, that kind of thing. So that's kind of my thoughts on fan service, which, by the way, I mentioned this before about the graphics. The animation in this show is superb. It is godly. Okay, it's so good, in fact, that I spent the entire first episode in basically just shell shock over how good the animation is. It is magical, honestly. I mean, these people, they have to be on every stimulant on the planet. Okay, there's a whole Sylvanas video of joking about Demon Slayer's animators. That's what this is. It applies to this, too. These people are next level. Okay, I mean, Kaguya-sama's got good animation, Quintessential Quintuplets has good animation, but this, oh boy, this is a whole new level. I mean, this is, they had God animate this. It is great. Okay, now there are a few shots that are a little bit weird, but, I mean, they can't all be gems, right? But in terms of general animation, it is fantastic. The effects in this show, also great. Also, one refreshing detail with this show, voice actors. Let's talk about that. With Recovery of an MMO Junkie, which was my last review, I talked about how I called it an A-list anime. Part of the reason I called it that was because of the voice actors that are all top-tier people. In this show, I actually didn't recognize that many people. I only recognized, I think, one person, and I don't even remember who it was that I think it was Shinju. It was Shinju that had the voice actress that I had recognized. But I'm not even fully sure what I recognized her from. I'd have to look it up. But I know that I've definitely heard her voice before. I think she did a character, I mean, maybe she did do a character in Recovery of an MMO Junkie. But I'm not entirely sure. But other than that, you had mostly original, quote-unquote, voice actors in this show, so it was very refreshing. In fact, I thought that the guy who was voicing Gojo for the first 2 episodes, I thought he was the guy who voices Invincible. I was pretty freaking convinced that's who it was. I looked it up, it's not, but I don't know. It's something about his voice. It reminded me of that. So yeah, it was refreshing to hear and see different people in this show. And they're all great voice actors, too. I mean, these aren't cheap people. So yeah, that's really something to say about the quality of the show. As for some of the side characters and things, you have Juju, as they call her. Insert your jokes here. She was a pretty fun character. I would call her a tsundere, but she's not a love interest or anything, so I'm not sure if that descriptor even works. And she's also not interested in anybody, so I don't know. She's kind of just snippy. We'll call her that. Other than that, her sister, who is taller than her and more mature, is also her younger sister. She's a great character. She's probably one of my favorite characters. The other characters in this show are basically irrelevant. Even characters that are reoccurring, they're not a big deal, right? There is the guy who, I'm going to call him Mrs. Doubtfire. Dude looks like a lady. He dresses up. He cross-dresses for his cosplay. I also, just like everyone else, thought it was a woman when he started. However, I was listening to the character, and I was like, dude, this is obviously voiced by a guy. And then they revealed that it was a guy, and I was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. that would explain a few things. I did like that plot line, although I think they pushed it a little bit too much. There was a little bit too much of the same theme of, like, being comfortable with yourself. It was a little bit excessive, you know, because I got it the first time, and then you brought it up a second time and a third time, and, you know, it kind of got old from there. But I do understand this show has a heavy emphasis on, like, being comfortable with yourself and doing what you want to do. You know, if you have a hobby, you go pursue that hobby. It doesn't matter what gender you are or anything like that. I understood the meaning of everything. They did push it a little bit, though, so take that for what you will. If that's something that bothers you, then it might bother you a little bit more than it did me. For me, it was just kind of a passing note that I would include here. But yeah, other than that, there was also some heavy themes of, like, passion and craftsmanship. So obviously the cosplays, there's a lot of emphasis on that in this show, of building it and showing things off, and, you know, showing different ways that they make stuff. And so I thought that was pretty cool. It added a different dynamic that I don't normally see with shows, right? Because you always want to see something unique, even in something very straightforward, like a slice of life, as you would see here. So it's cool to have that unique detail. In this case, it would be cosplay, just like how quintessential quintuplets, you know, the gimmick is that there's 5 of them, and it's a harem, but in a different way. They're all rich, but they're terrible students, you know. I'd say it's a gimmick. I'd say gimmick is the way to put it. So each show needs a gimmick, and that's the gimmick of this show. As for some of the additional things as well, the relationship between the characters in this show is pretty good. It's also pretty realistic. They don't fall, like, totally head over heels for each other instantly. They don't really have neither of them have a crush on each other to start out. So Kitagawa isn't really attracted to Gojo, and Gojo thinks Kitagawa is attractive because she objectively is, but doesn't have an active infatuation with her, if that makes sense, right? So you don't have anything really going on. Now, they tease each other a little bit. By each other, I mostly mean Kitagawa teases Gojo. But she ends up being the one that falls for him first. However, that doesn't go anywhere. Even after 2 seasons, Season 2 ends with, essentially, them taking a selfie. Am I disappointed? A little bit. Just a tiny bit. Mostly because I don't want to read the manga. I already have too many other manga that I'm supposed to read and still haven't, and I start new shows and then have to continue with the manga. That's why I'm trying to watch shows that conclude, or that I think conclude, but then I step on landmines, and the result is I'm left disappointed. So, it wasn't a bad ending, but Season 2 didn't end with a conclusive anything. So yeah, I gotta wait for Season 3, which, according to Google, at the rate it's going, would be like 2028. So let's hope to God that doesn't happen. But in the meantime, the relationship's going pretty well. However, they haven't actually started anything. They're close. They're really close. Kitagawa was close to confessing it all. However, if you know anything about how TV shows work, you know it's probably not going to be like, okay, they're really, really close at the end of Season 2, then at the start of Season 3 it's going to happen. No, sir. That's not going to... At best, it's going to be Episode 1 and they drop the bombshell 3D Kanojo style. But that's probably not going to happen, so it's probably going to be the end of Season 3. Is that disappointing? A little bit. But it is still satisfying to see them, right? Because, I mean, they're good friends, they have great chemistry, they work off each other really well, and they have very complementary personalities, right? Kitagawa is very excitable, bouncing off the walls, wants to do stuff. A little bit dumb, but a good character. And also not, like, flat-out stupid. I don't think she's stupid. I just think she's a little bit... She's not the sharpest tool in the shed, we'll say that. As for Gojo, he's a good main character. He doesn't annoy me, right? So he's not like Rito, like Nishikata, but he could be better, admittedly. He could be a better main character. He freaks out too much. He has those annoying moments where he's like, and he's your usual romance anime main character. I would like to see a show where the main character isn't like that, but the time will come, okay? As for the rating of this show, I would give this show a solid 9.5 out of 10. Actually, I would probably give it more like a 9 out of 10. I don't like doing the 0.5. I think it kind of takes away. The show accomplishes most of what it's meant to do. However, I think that there's a little bit left to be desired. There's a little bit more it could focus on in terms of the romance. Okay, I think Season 1 did a great job with the pacing of everything, but Season 2, it was a little bit slower than I'd like. Now, on the poll that I took, you guys seem to really enjoy it, or at least people that may or may not be enjoy the show. So that's good at least. But, that's all we really have for this show. 2 seasons isn't long enough for me to need to make a huge review talking about it. And if there's nothing to really criticize with the show, then the reviews aren't as long. So this one was a little longer than the last 2, but it's also way shorter than the ones that I have genuine criticisms with, like From Me to You or To Love Ru. So yeah, that's all we got for today. If you guys enjoyed, please leave a like, a comment, and I will see you all in the next video. Have a fantastic day and a fantastic life. Goodbye, everyone.